That's just to me, like, it's like, hey, we're, well, what are the stats on that? And then boom, here they are. And it's like, well, what's that number? Boom, here they are. And I was like, whoa, she did this really well, because it was like the questions that I had was your next topic. And it did. That's the kind
Thank
of
you.
article that you look for.
Thank you.
But sorry,
So
Scott, I just had to tell her that I enjoyed just reading it in general, regardless of the topic and the conversation. It was just that the article was so well written in the way that it was put together. So I just had to
thank
give her
you.
kudos on that one.
Well, I think kudos are definitely due, because it's not always easy as a parent to sit down and read a lengthy article, which that one is.
Longest piece I've ever written for Golfweek.
That's awesome. I read it all. Well, okay, like the last two paragraphs I didn't, because I actually was technically working when I received that message, and I was like, this will probably take 5 minutes, and I started reading. It's like, this is not going to be 5 minutes. And so I started getting pinged, and it's like, all right, it's time to get back to work. But like, as a parent and as somebody who's working, to sit down and read basically an entire article of any length, like it's more than 1,000 words, is uncommon. So
I appreciate that. Yeah.
yeah. And
Well, I was sitting in. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What?
I was saying that I was sitting in front of my computer when I was reading it, so it took me a good hour and a half, because I was Googling stuff in between to answer. Well, because it was written in 21, I'm like, well, where is it progressed since then? And I started looking at stats going forward, and it's like, it still lines up with I mean, it really does. There's one portion that I found that, like, it's completely changed, but it's neat. I'm excited to talk about it.
Oh, yeah, sounds good.
Well, so Beth Ann, thank you for joining us on the Center Cut podcast. We try to be a golf podcast for the common golfer. And with that said, we do get into professional golf, in particular men's, but we don't really dwell upon it. Obviously we spend a little time with the Ryder Cup, and we enjoy other topics as well. And so bringing you on is, exciting for us, and it also gives us a great opportunity to talk about some of the other things, because that's what we really, really like to dig into. And is there anything that you would kind of like to open up with, or we might just start with the questions?
Well, I'm just happy to join you both to talk about an array of things, I would imagine. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, no problem.
Absolutely. So, we were talking about the article from 21 and course setups, and one of the first things that it brought to my mind is, does the game of golf need to grow, or does it just need to maintain what it's already established? And if I can follow up to that, whose shoulders do you really feel like it falls on to grow the game? And what role does public golf, like municipal golf, play in the modern landscape of the game?
So as a muni player myself, I definitely think that obviously the grassroots level is always going to be important, but I think the heavy hitters in the game, the folks with all the money, they shoulder most of the load. Yes, the game needs to grow. Obviously there was a huge boom, during COVID. Women and girls are the fastest growing segment of the game, and has been for a little while now, and that's fantastic. But there's just so much room to grow there as well when you consider, how much buying power women have in households, and determining how money is spent. The more women that you can attract into the game to enjoy the game with families, I think you'll have more staying power for the whole family when mom and dad are both involved. So, I definitely think that the tours, the LPGA and the PGA Tour, you know, that's the aspiration. That's where the dreams really start for young girls. That's why the Augusta National Women's Amateur is so important because it's on NBC. It comes before the Masters, so it, you know, all the men in the house want to turn on the ANWA because they want to see what Augusta looks like this year. They want a sneak preview, and so, you know, that gets their little girls, you know, paying attention because they're watching women compete on this iconic venue. And so, you know, anytime you can, that's why this whole push to get women playing the iconic venues at major championships is so vital, because you have people who are already golf fans but very rarely watch women's golf will tune into Pebble Beach, will tune into the Old Course, we'll tune in to see, you know, Augusta National and all the wonderful venues that the women have gone to recently. So, so I definitely think that the USGA, the KPMG Women's PGA are doing a fantastic job. Now the RNA is on board as well too, of pushing these venues. The women going to Muirfield for the first time last year was huge. So, you know, this is definitely moving the ball in the right direction, but I, at the end of the day, you know, for the LPGA to really grow, you know, corporate America has to continue to get on board and put a lot of what they say about what their priorities are and their missions are within their companies to actually write checks that back that up to support the women's game, you know, even still at a fraction of the level that they do the men. You know, there's just a lot of companies that are only involved in men's golf, but if they were to just put a fraction of that money over into women's golf, it would make a huge difference, especially domestically.
Okay, very cool. So did you just kind of answer like one of the questions then, that you feel like the shoulders do kind of fall on corporate America? I want to make certain that I heard that correctly, because that's something that I've been pretty vocal about on this podcast and talking about like my group of golfing friends, is that I think, you know, there's a set of shoulders that for the game to grow organically and to grow in the way I'd like to see it grow, you know, it's got to fall squarely on somebody like myself, you know. And so some people agree with me. Some people say it's like the local PGA professional. Others say, you know, it's the USGA. And believe it or not, like, you're probably the first person I've heard say corporate America. Or this is what it sounded like a little bit. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, because I think when this is a little bit of my train of thought there, you know, as I was mentioning the women going to Augusta National for the first time, it was my hope that, you know, we know the membership at Augusta National controls a lot of the money in the corporate world, right? So it was
Yeah.
my hope that as green jackets are scattered around Augusta National on that Saturday to watch the women compete, that their eyes would be opened to the talent that the women have, that for many of them it would be their first time watching a women's event in person. And it was my hope that that would then translate into bigger opportunities, that they would go back to their board at their respective companies or talk to their friends in the grill room and say, you know what, I think we're really missing an opportunity here. Because when you get these folks, you know, the saying in the LPGA always goes that if you come see us in person, you won't look at us the same again. You know, it's a totally different dynamic when you see a woman like Arya Jutanagarn hit a 2-iron off the tee and you hear that sound and your head turns and you go, wow, this is not what I thought women's golf was. So, you know, it takes that experience. And so, you know, much like, you know, I totally believe that grassroots is important, but I really think that we look at icons in the sports, you know, of our lives, the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, the, you know, I mean, we can just go through every sport there is. People that you dream of becoming. You ask every little kid, what do you want to be when they grow up? And so many of them mention their favorite athletes because they want to be a star professional player in whatever sport that they enjoy. And I think, you know, the beauty of golf is, you know, when a child says that, they can play that sport alongside mom and dad as they're working toward that goal. So it's so cool. But to have somebody that you're aspiring to be, or to have like a Sayri Pak revolutionize, you know, golf in all of Asia, to have those moments, you have to have corporate America putting up the money for these women to play for. I mean, at the end of the day, they have to have a stage in which to compete. So, as much as we're seeing especially in women's golf, the game move in a positive direction, it's still still fragile, right? Every year they lose sponsors. Every year they struggle to fill that void. Every year they struggle to push the purses higher and higher so the players can maintain a living out there. And so, it would be nice for there to be more breathing room where there's there are more folks in line and some competition. Imagine that competition to actually be an LPGA title sponsor. That would be amazing, And so, that's just so important in order to get, TV viewership and all of those things, because the size of the purse, the quality of the venue impacts the respect that people have around the organization. It's just the truth. When you say the women are now playing for a $2 million first place prize of the CME Group Championship, people kind of take notice and say, wow, that's a lot of money. These women must be pretty good. Maybe I should pay attention. Money matters.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point you bring up, that money does matter, because you hear a lot of people talk about like how much PGA Tour is paying out right now, or how much Live's paying out. And for me, as like a golfing traditionalist and purist, not a hardcore one, but it's like, why is it about the money? Why isn't it about legacy? Why isn't it about, championship rings? And that's why, like, I'll never let go. Jack Nicklaus is the greatest of all time because he's got the most rings. He's got the most jackets, and people love to throw at my face, like, well, he only made as much money as Tiger did in like 2004, in his whole career. And it's like, times have changed, man. And it's like, they didn't talk about money back then. That was honestly just like icing on the cake. So I do think you're right. The money does talk, and it gets people's attention. And so that's a very good point that you bring up. And I'm happy to hear you're a municipal player too. I didn't grow up entirely municipal, but I pretty much did. I was never a member at a private club, but my dad liked to jump around and play different courses. A, because he enjoyed it, but B, because he didn't want me to just get used to, one course, one kind of conditions. So I think that's cool, talking to a fellow municipal golfer.
Hey, the price was right. It was 50 cents to play 9 holes. And then when you got older, it was $1. And then
where was this?
The junior, this was at Cleveland Heights. This was the summer league when I got started. Wow. Yeah. I literally live like 4 minutes from there now, but and then I think my junior membership was $150. So it was for the year. So it was you couldn't beat it. And that's where all the kids played. Even the country club kids came over to play the Muni because that's where everyone else was.
Well, I feel like municipal golf is the pulse of the game. And I just finished Jeff Shackelford's book, Grounds for Golf. And he was saying, like, if he had access to the USGA's money, that's what he'd love to be doing, was going and improving like the infrastructure of municipal golf, which would benefit everybody. It'd benefit, 100%. Women, children, men, seniors, like everyone, folks with disabilities, anybody who wants to even step foot on that property, it would benefit them. So something that I've been curious about, and I know there's a thing or two that Pat's curious about. So the PGA Tour University program, or whatever it's really considered, and how it feeds now to the university golfers, the collegiate golfers, onto the tour. What are your thoughts on that? In particular, they're focusing just on Division I players. And I've got some follow-up questions to go along with that, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a fantastic system. I think one thing that has been controversial about it maybe would be that, when you're playing for maybe a mid-major school, you're the standout at a smaller school, that you're not playing the strong enough schedule to get you to that promised land. And so it kind of takes away from those unicorns that we see in a place like Western Carolina. I'm thinking of the Postman, right? So I think that's kind of one of the bummers about it, because with the transfer portal and everything, it's just so easy for a kid who's transforming a program somewhere to then say peace out after a couple years and try to make hay to get that card. I understand it's just kind of an unfortunate consequence of it, right? But I wish the LPGA, I'm actually pursuing a story on this now to try to figure out what I think is the best route for the LPGA to take. And I would like to see the LPGA have a similar system. And, I really look at the fact that it is, rewarding a player who stays in school.
Yeah.
I like that. I've always been a person who says there's always one kid in every class, for the most part, around the world that I think should not go to college. I saw no reason for, Lydia to go to college or Lexi to go to college. I mean, realistically speaking, maybe in retrospect, it would have, been a good thing for them. But at that time, nothing in their lives was pointing in that direction. Right. So, but for the most part, everyone needs to stay in school. So I like that this rewards that and encourages that. And I really think that, especially for an LPGA, a college senior going to the LPGA, the Epson Tour is such a grind and a blow to to moving the transition from standout star in college golf to if I had a bad week at Q school or I was sick or, I had a slight tweak in my wrist, to now I've got to go play the Epson Tour for a year and just grind my rear end off for basically no money. And and you might have been playing some of the best golf of your life, and I just had a conversation earlier today with a player who, of course, doesn't exist on the LPGA, and she was player of the year in college, playing best golf of her life. This was around COVID too, but goes out on the Epson Tour, and of course she never made it. But she said I should say she never made it to the LPGA, has decided to go to medical school. She's a phenomenally talented person in many regards. But the point is that she said if LPGA U or something similar had existed, maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But
No.
it's just in my mind, because they won't do what I've always wanted them to do, which is have a draft. What I want the LPGA to do, because thankfully I'm glad Q School's coming back to the PGA Tour, and I like the idea of a Q School, but the LPGA's Q School is in December, which is right in the middle of the college golf season. So you would never have a draft for any other sport right before your NCAA championship. So obviously, in every other sport, the draft comes after your NCAA championship run. So it's just so an awkward, unfortunate thing that the LPGA season, is so set up, so opposed to the NCAA season that players feel like they have to go to Q school and then they ditch their schools for the last semester, and go on to play professional golf. And so I always wanted them to have a June mini Q school where only college players would compete, and the top 2 players, maybe I'm making this up, but a very small number of cards, you'd graduate straight to the LPGA mid-year right after the NCAA championship, and boom, what a great storyline to really follow these players who would come fresh out of college, just like Rose Zhang did, and go straight to the LPGA. And then if you didn't get your card in that little mini Q school, then you'd go on and try in the normal one in December, right? But anyways, nobody liked that idea of mine. So instead of that, LPGA
I like it.
I'll take that as an alternative.
Well, that
That
was
was a
gonna be one of my
long-winded answer.
That's okay. That's what we're here for. So that was gonna be one of my follow-up questions. Do you ever see the LPGA Tour implementing something similar? At some point, I would like to hear your thoughts on Division II golf, kind of compared to Division I, because we were both at Florida Southern, a Division II school, and a quite good one. Pat played Division I golf.
Played a
I can
bunch
let
of
him.
D2 schools in my D1 golf days, but yeah, we did. Yeah, no, we
Awesome.
did. We did. Well, and speaking of different divisions of golf, Beth Ann, I want to go to your article real quick.
Mhm.
And it was one of the points that there was a difference made. There really was. And that was Coach Rogers from Ogletree? Oglebees?
Oglethorpe.
Oglethorpe, yes. And then you have he was looking at the D3 and saying, hey, we need to shorten these golf courses way down. You know, they were getting down there sub 6,000 and saying this is where it needs to be. And you know, the golf is not where it needs to be. We're getting frustrated. It's taking forever, whatever it may be. And looking at it, and so that's where I started going to the internet, making notes, and I'm like, okay, let's see what it was. So in 21, Methodist won the women's NCAA D3 championship with a plus 79 for the 3-day total. And second was Carnegie Mellon at plus 84. So it's like, okay, who won the individual? Well, there was an individual, she shot plus 3. She balled out and won by 13 shots.
Wow.
You know,
okay.
and it's
She's an anomaly.
Yeah, she's an anomaly.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, it is what it is. You know, and at the same time, but then I go and I look at 23. So maybe those rules have been implemented. Let's see what it is. So I go look at it. Scott, you'll like this one. They play at Howie in the Hills at Mission Inn.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Love it.
So they played Mission Inn at 58-23 at a par 73. Okay. Right? What wins? Plus 57.
Wow.
Right? Individual shoots plus 5. Okay. But she was able to shoot 5 under the last day and come back and win.
Oh,
And
wow.
her team finished in second place, right? And on the last day, they were able to shoot 299. That is what you should be able to do. Is your one should be able to go out, and 299 is it you know, if you can have a 900 total, it's not terrible golf. It's, you know, it's a decent pace of play. Everybody gets to play. It's D3 golf. I mean, we have to remember that as well. You know what I mean? But it's like, if you can range in that, if you can get around 300, it's golf. You know, and it's a college golf team that's playing golf, and it's D3 golf, and it could be D2, and you know, but at the same time, you look at some of this stuff at D1 at the end of the article, and it's like, there's no comparison to anywhere close is what it is. When they were playing a concession, and it's like, you know, plus 5, plus 40, it's like, come on, guys. That, I mean, that gets out of hand.
Exactly.
And I agree with that. And the college golf aspect is so night and day different. It really is. It really is.
For D3, which of course you don't get a scholarship, right? These are not scholarship athletes. And so coaches were saying to me, you know, these are kids who are playing high school golf. They're used to shooting, you know, of course, usually it's 9 holes, right? And you're shooting in the 30s, usually maybe low 40s in high school golf. And now you're playing obviously shorter courses. You expect to play a little bit longer when you go into college golf, but you're playing for the love of the game in D3. Nobody's paying you to be there, right? You could just go join a sorority and do other things. But instead, you know, you want to play for the love of the game. You sign up to play college golf, and then all of a sudden they got you playing a completely different game over, you know, well over 6,000 yards in college at D3, and these players can't break 85, and they can't break 90 in many cases, and they're not having any fun. And what I loved about the research from that coach was looking at what the male players were hitting in average on their second shot into a par 4, what club they had in their hand, versus the women who are hitting, you know, 4, 5, and 6 irons into or hybrids, you know, in for their average club, you know, into a par 4, that many of them they can't even reach the par 4s in regulation. So you know, it's this whole mentality that if a woman's not playing from far enough back, from whatever arbitrary yardage you have in your head, which I think in college golf is at least 6,000 yards for women, if it's not higher than that, then you're disrespecting them, you know, which is completely and utterly false, you know, and just a terrible premise to be working from. But I think that that's what they felt like, why a lot of coaches were hesitant to do it, because they said, well, wait a second, the talent has never been greater. People are shooting lower numbers than ever before. They're hitting the ball further than ever before. Why would we push it back? Well, because you had it too long to begin with for a really long time. So just because it's always been wrong doesn't, so I just think it was just so fun. I love the fact that it gives these players a good taste in their mouth when they leave college to want to keep playing for fun, because there are a lot of players who get demoralized playing at when they go to the next level, whatever that next level is, whether you're going to high school golf or college golf or professional golf, and you get demoralized and you just shove your clubs in the closet and you don't want to touch them again for however long. And I'm afraid that was probably happening to a lot of players, because they were being forced to hit 3-wood into a par 5 in competition when they used to eat it up in high school.
Well, here's an interesting little tidbit I'll share. I used to be a professional at a private club. We had a lot of ladies who had handicaps 15 and up. In fact, the vast majority of them were 15 and up. And even for the ladies that were in the 20s, high 20s, in terms of handicap index, one of the things that stood out to me during tournament play or like their Thursday games, when I'd be looking at their scorecards and entering them into a computer, a lot of these ladies ate up the par threes. I'm not saying they played them under par, but the par threes on our course predominantly were under 130 yards. Now, they're hitting drivers, 3-woods, 5-woods, 7-woods for some of the longer hitters, that maybe hit their drive like 180, which there were a few, even in the higher handicaps. They might have been even hitting a hybrid, but seldom were they ever hitting an iron. But the bottom line was they could hit a wood, get it on the green, and then 2 putts. Why is that important? Because they were actually very straight off the tee, and they were actually pretty good putters. But you put them on a 300-yard par 4, it's a 3-shot hole for them.
Yeah.
And then heaven forbid you give them a par 5, like our 18th hole, I think is 400 yards. That's a 4 and 5 shot hole. And there's water left and right and short of the green.
Yeah,
so
forced carry.
Force carries. And if they happen to have one of their 4 or 5 shots go offline, it's in the drink. And so, they could, not even exaggerating, they could sometimes play the 2 par 3s on the back 9 in fewer strokes than they could play the 18th hole.
Oh yeah. And that's so fun. You literally dread teeing it up on the 18th hole when it requires perfect golf from you just to even make bogey,
Yeah.
you, in your mind. I mean, we've all had those holes. I mean, I know I did growing up where I would in my mind, I'd play a par 4 I couldn't reach as a par 5, when I was younger, or even sometimes when I was older, because this happened to me in college golf too. But, I definitely think that this idea that women feel like they're playing basically in many cases a totally different game than the men, and then they have no way to realistically score unless even when it's perfection. I mean, it has to be like an all world up and down, from 100 yards to make par, and it, that's why I love that so many resorts and bucket list places like Bandon Dunes have picked up on this notion of adding, a severely forward tee, and because the irony here is that eventually many men get to this point in their game as well, where when they're seniors and they're not having any fun anymore, but they want to keep playing the game in their 80s, and they can't reach the par 4s in regulation either. So I love that it's a gender free, gender neutral tee. It's not doesn't have red on it, and just go play the forward tee and have fun, right? Just try it. To me, it's all about what club do you have in your hand on the second shot? What is this green designed to receive? What kind of shot? And that's, you have to basically play the hole backwards, when you're trying to set up a golf course, for women. for anyone really, but just for people who are hitting the ball a certain age, whether it's your kid, taking your kid out, to play and so that they can have fun. It's just so important.
Before we pivot, something I do want to mention, because I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and I just had it on Sunday. Somebody asked me, like, Scott, how much further do you think you hit your driver? And I'm not that long of a hitter, but I looked right at him. He's the same age as me, and I go 50 yards. And he was like, oh, you want to put a bet on that? I'm like, not really, because I know I'm going to hit it probably more than 50 past you. But it's like, in order for he and I to be hitting the same club into the green, that doesn't mean that after our tee shot, or for our next shot in to be the same distance, it doesn't mean after our tee shot we need to be side by side,
Right.
and I'm probably two clubs longer with the irons, maybe more, but 2 clubs. So realistically, if I have a 7-iron in from 170, if he's going to hit a 7-iron as well, he's got to be up at 145 or 150. So if I got him by 50 off the tee and 20 on the irons, that means he needs to be playing a box 70 yards ahead of me. And people don't equate that. And unfortunately, I'm not even certain if all the architects are, because it's quite common that you see a box 20 to 30 yards separated from the one behind and the one in front.
Yes.
So how are we making golf appropriate for these players with varying abilities with only 20, 30 yards when it looks like we need 70,
Yeah. I mean, this happens to me honestly often because I don't play that much golf anymore. And I still do have an ego where there's a certain distance that I'm like, I can't, I can't play that short, but
what's that number?
What is that number?
I mean, if it's I'll play 55. I'll play 54. If my options are 54 or 6,000. And I've never played this golf course before, and it's wet and windy. I'm playing 54 all day long. But if it's lower than that, then I feel kind of guilty, which is so stupid. But I feel guilty because if I step up on the tee and I hit a 200 and change drive, if I really hit it good and I hit it over 200 yards, and I'm playing from 5,200 yards, people will be like, what? But I might actually get to hit wedges in my second shot, which is exciting. But at the same time, there's just a guilt factor that's too much. But if I'm playing 6,000 yards and it's wet and windy and I've never seen this course before, that's still fun. Like that's a grind. I don't want to hit 3-wood and 7-wood all day, I never get to have an 8-iron in my hand on a par 4, whereas I look at the guys I'm playing with and they're hitting 7 and 8 and 9 irons all day long, for their second shots. So, it's a huge difference when you're out there with your, even the other day, I'm talking to a player who won on the Legends event. She's one of the youngest on the tour, on that she's still on the LPGA too, but she's bombing it. And one of the other legends is, always been known for her hybrids. Very, 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 very good hybrid player. But even so, you can be the best hybrid player in the world. And if you're getting out driven on every hole by like 40 yards, it's got to, you might have your 1 week, I'll
take my 7-iron over your hybrid, right?
Right. I mean, you'd have to have the best week of your life, really, to win a tournament, against people who are hitting it that much further. So to your point,
a quarter bet.
right. For the coach.
Yeah.
I mean, so I just, I talk about this a lot with, for couples, because when I wrote that piece on course setup, the comments on my Twitter were, so many of them were from guys who play with either their partners or friends, who are girls. And they just say exactly that, my girlfriend always tees off in the forward box, but we're usually hitting from about the same area on our second shot. And it never really occurred to me what a disadvantage she has for the rest of the hole.
Yeah. How did you not figure that out?
Right. But it's that way for a lot of people because they feel like that evens it out because you teed off from so much further up, and so in their mind, or even if you're like, I do know that as a woman too, a lot of times if my ball is in 30 yards ahead of yours off the tee, that you'll often hear snide comments from like, oh, you really belted that one out, or what an advantage you have on this hole, and I'm like, really? Because we're both probably gonna hit 7-iron.
Yeah.
So, but it looks to the eyes, like a crazy advantage, So anyways.
And I'd be willing to bet for my buddy and I, when we hit our 7-irons into the green, if we, get the tee box right for that, I bet my 7-iron's got a higher apex than
Of
his.
course. Yes.
So my balls.
The apex is the key. Like that's the number that they got to start looking at, in my opinion, is looking at spin rate and apex, because the spin rate and apex tells it all. Because if my apex is higher off the tee than yours is, and mine has lower spin somehow,
yes,
that ball's going.
I mean, that's a thing too. You know what I mean? Like speed, power, flexes. I mean, all that stuff. The technology correlates all together. And the apex is the massive number, because that's one. And I loved your article, one, because it had a lot of numbers, and I could go back and look and research and look at stuff and like just see like are they closing the gap at all? I went back and I looked at the driving distances on each tour for the last, obviously the women only goes back to 92, which is ridiculous, but Laura Davies dominated the 90s in driving distance anyway. But you look at the men and I'm like, okay, well, let's go back and let's look at it. So I looked at, I went all the way back to like 01. You're looking at John Daly and Wendy Doolin. There was 41 yards of separation, right? Okay, let's look at 22. It was 42 yards of separation.
Yeah.
So the gap isn't closing. Van Dam made it look like the gap closed with Bryson because she bombed it. I mean, but if you look at the numbers, she's the longest hitter of, you know what I mean? It's obvious. But see, in 21, when the article was written, the number was dialed back to 33 yards. But that was the closest that it's been in years. And it's like, but then you look at the same thing from the other chart. I can't remember who did the research on it, but it was Sewoo Kim and DJ. And you look at their 5 and 6 irons. What's the difference there? Another 40.
Yeah.
So it's like you got 40 off the tee. We got 40 yards of distance in our 6 irons. So shouldn't we just kind of go forward 40?
Right. I know.
And then we have to take the equation from there. Then we have to figure out how much further we have to go from there.
Well, and the other thing that's like an intangible, I guess. It's not really an intangible, it's actually tangible. is the as a guy who's very familiar with the actual golf course, the LPGA setups, often the fairways run firm and fairways run soft and the greens run hard.
Burn.
So, it's so frustrating for players, that they can't get the roll off the tee because they're putting so much water on the fairways, because they don't want the golf courses for LPGA players. They don't want to do whatever, they won't do whatever anyone, requests. In other words, if you're going to host a PGA Tour event, the golf course will do anything and everything you ask of them to make it exactly right for PGA Tour conditions, right? Whereas oftentimes a course hosting an LPGA tournament might be like, we don't want to lose our golf course, so we're not going to push it that much. We're going to water more than you want, or we're not going to, they might not add a tee box, or, do something that would be necessary to create optimal conditions or the optimal setup for an LPGA tournament, because quite frankly, it's not like there's a line of courses oftentimes for your average event, that's looking to host, or it's tied to wherever the title sponsor, is very much wanting to have, their tournament. Like Houston, I'm not saying anything was bad with the Houston course, but I'm just saying that Chevron wants to be in Houston. And it's not like there's a plethora of name brand courses in Houston. So that, handicaps one of the LPGA's majors, in that, it has to be in the Houston market. Though that golf course has done a lot to accommodate the women. But I'm just saying that in general, the LPGA players are harping, we want to have firmer fairways, and we want to have more receptive greens.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah, you gotta
anyways.
be able to say, hey, course, we're gonna give the course X amount of money to host our tournament. Here's how we want it to play. And
Right.
they go, okay.
Or you're gonna say,
that's the thing.
I've got 3 other courses in the area who want to host us. So if you can't do this, we'll move over here. But they don't have that leverage.
Right. Because and then I think that's just purely with the club, because the
Yeah.
club is the one that's saying, no, we're not going to do that. Because I'm sure
Right.
that the superintendent's going, hey, I want to shine. Y'all let me do what I can do and
Right.
watch me shine so I can get to a course that's going to host a PGA Tour event because how good I did with the LPGA. But the club won't let the LPGA go in there and go, hey, we'd like the greens to roll about an 11, 10 and a half with a nice soft feel to it. You know, let the girls have some ball marks and stop it.
Yeah.
And then we would like our fairways to roll out a little bit more than 20 yards like they do on the tour.
Yeah. Yeah. And the funny thing about
give us 30 yards to roll all of a sudden, and now all of a sudden we're playing a different game.
Right. Well, and the other thing that is kind of, you don't really know in the stats unless you know. The LPGA only measures 2 holes per tournament for driving distance. So many times Lexi Thompson cannot hit driver on the 2 holes that they pick to measure. Often are holes that the long players can't even hit driver on because, it might narrow in their landing area. So they're just going to hit 3-wood. So the driving stats aren't even a true indication oftentimes of how far the long players really hit it, which is why obviously it's going to roll further in the desert, with Lexi playing in Vegas. But that's why it was so fun to be able to see, Shot Tracker and actually look at, how far she hits the ball on every hole because they actually measure every shot, whereas they don't have that capability on the LPGA. So Lexi's 270-yard driving distance on the LPGA is not accurate for like how far she can actually hit driver.
No, and you could tell that if you look at the stats because the stat varies from year to year too rapidly.
Right.
You go 284, 270. And it's like, wait a minute, what happened? You know what I mean? Like, what happened here? Where did we lose that? And it wasn't, all it was the fact that, like you say, they don't monitor enough of them.
Yeah. Yep. And the 2 holes that they pick aren't maybe the best 2 holes to pick to measure.
So if we can pivot,
yes,
I wanted to go back to something that you kind of already brought up. Who is in your superstar pipeline, like a golfer that we may not know about?
Who's the kid that doesn't need to go to college? The next one that's on the way.
Yeah, like the next Lydia or Lexi.
The one that you said doesn't need to go to college. We want to know who those are.
That's a good question on the up and coming.
Yeah, when I heard her say there are a few that don't need to go to college, I said the question is, who's the next one that doesn't need to go to college?
Yeah, I'm going to have to think about that for a little bit because I will put a caveat to that because it has changed because of NIL. So some players that probably would never have sniffed college, they're, whether because their parents didn't want them to go, now that you're seeing it's a very small number, like, on your one hand of female players who are making really good money in college golf off NIL. But those are the people that I'm talking about, that you would think would just, move on. But I would say, that has changed the landscape a little bit to encourage players to go for at least 1 year, see what it's like, make your 6 figures, put some money in the bank and kind of slow down the process just a little bit. And I think that's, Amari Avery's is one of them, that when I talked to her, she's a long player, really, really talented player. When I talked to her at Olympic a couple years ago, she indicated she was going to go to Q school, and I didn't think she was going to go to college at all. And then she did show up at USC, had the time of her life, went back for another year, and so she's she was one, obviously Rose Zhang, but Rose really wanted to go to college. That was she really wanted to have that experience. She wanted to have a fuller life beyond golf, and she knew that if she could get out of the house and and be independent for a little while, that it would do her a lot of good. And she was right. So that's a good question, because it'll be interesting to see, how the next generation handles it. Good question. Don't have a great answer right now.
Well, maybe we'll have to have you back
When did you
again.
know about? Oh, I'm sorry. When did you know about Rose Zhang?
Oh, when did I know about Rose Zhang? Goodness.
I mean, I'm just wondering, like 10, or 13.
No, she wasn't. It wasn't that young. It was probably more early teens, 13, 14.
Okay.
10. There's only a handful of players I've known at the age of 10.
Well, you know what I mean. I didn't know how much
yeah.
of a special talent she is. Was she that kid that that you knew that she was on that show, and at some point she's gonna get to Rory hitting in the dryer and Tiger on Johnny Carson, and you know what I mean? Like, was she that kid? Nah, she just started showing up on leaderboards in her teens, and here she is.
Yeah, well, she was playing really well in California, on the local junior tours in California at a young age. Obviously she played really well in the AJGA, and once she got in the AJGA and started, winning tournaments, Player of the Year, obviously, everybody, kind of took notice then of who she was. But it's funny because, like, Amari, I was talking about Amari or Alexa Pano, they were on the short game. And so, the Netflix documentary that blew up, and so, those are players that we followed for different reasons because of the short game. But obviously, Morgan, Lexi, those are players.
I forgot about that show.
Yeah, it's good. You should go back and rewatch it. It's hilarious. Yeah. It really is. Latana Stone, I knew her at age 10. She obviously has come close at the ANWA a few times. Plays at LSU, but she was playing the U.S. Amateur at age 10. So some of those breakthrough moments. Michelle Wee knew her at age 10. But yeah, it's a small list of 10-year-olds.
Right. No, yeah. Well, it's just one of those things. Like, you go back and you see, like, hey, there's the footage on that kid when he was 10. You know what I mean? Like, it's it's kind of one of those things. There's that footage. There it is. I mean, there's some of it out there, but then there's the kids that, I don't know. There's some of them that I've heard about for a couple of years, and it's like, well, waiting on them to bust on the scene.
Yep.
But most all of those are in men's golf, because it's one of those things. It's just because same concept. It's hard to hear about the women that are coming up, just unless you follow very strictly on the tournaments that they're playing in.
Right.
Everybody can go to GolfStat and find college golfers. That's the greatest thing that there is because you can go and you can find who's playing good college golf. All you gotta do is point and click for a little bit and figure it out. But outside of that, junior stuff is hard to find because everybody's trying to make money by putting some type of tour out, So which one's the latest, greatest lately? I mean, the AJGA is always going to be the AJGA, I feel, but everybody's trying to dip in the honeypot of golf and kids,
Very much so. Big money making business.
Yeah, to say the least. Well, since we don't have the pipeline established today, maybe we'll have to have you back at a future time, but we do have another question or two. We want to give you a chance to really answer it, so
yeah, sounds good.
You, at least from what I've researched, doesn't look like you've written a book yet. Have you?
No, I've been asked to write a couple, but
what would be a topic?
Well, no, these were more people asking me to write about them.
Be the writer.
That's a good question. The book I would like to write that I never will be able to write is the parent book. The crazy parent book. I just think it's just stuff just the stuff that you see and hear over the years that it would be great if a phenom would come out later in life in her 30s, and come back and say, if I had to do it all over again, this is how I wish it had gone down, this, and maybe in conjunction with their parents, here's how we would have done it differently, I think that would be so helpful, not for me to necessarily out anything, but for somebody to want to come together and collaborate on here's what we learned. And there's no one pathway that works for everybody, for sure. But there are some solid truths of do's and don'ts that I think would be helpful if people, would just be honest about, what worked and what didn't work. I think that would be a fascinating read. And, I don't know that I know anyone that's ready for that by any stretch of the imagination, but I would love to write that book. I think that would help so many people, and I've done a few little stories talking to golf instructors and sports psychologists about advice for parents. Just a simple small thing is your reactions on the golf course when your kid hits a bad shot. Are you shaking your head and, turning away? And are you agonizing with them as much as they are? Because that's not good. So just your reactions to how your kids are playing during a tournament, the conversations on the car ride home, those types of topics are important for everyone. And that's just surface level stuff, but when you're trying to raise a phenom or you're trying to raise a tour player, here's what I wish I had done differently. I would love to write that book.
I hope you do, because I would love to read it. And by any means, if you ever want some stories, I got some. I'm not a phenom, but golf has always been my passion, and my parents, definitely tried to make it a passion I could pursue. So.
Well, there are a lot of great parents out there, but there are some.
They weren't perfect though.
Tactics.
Yeah, they weren't perfect.
Yeah. The old head shaking when your kid hits a bad shot. I only had to deal with that about twice, and my mom goes, "I'm not watching anymore. I'm dropping you off at the first tee, and you're gonna have to figure it out on your own." I said, "Okay, no problem." I'd rather do it that way. You know what I mean? It was always like, "Hey, there's your tee. Go play well. We'll catch you later." You know what I mean? And they would disappear. Like I would, it was one of those things. I go to put my ball on the ground and line up and turn around, and like they're gone, and it's like they're not there. Like this is us, And but that's one of the great things about golf is it's you and that white ball. Go chase it,
Yeah.
That's what I love about it.
Very much so. I'm always cracking up during tournaments when there are some parents that never walk together. Like mom and dad are always like 50 yards apart because one of them is too stressed out for the other one to want to be around that parent.
Yeah.
And so they've always got to be on their own, like 50 yards ahead. So, and it's always funny because as a writer, I'm outside the ropes, walking around usually with moms and dads and coaches and siblings and when I've never met someone before, trying to figure out, are they a talker? Do they want to talk? Are they like way too hyper, during a round? Are you a post-round talker? It's like trying to figure all that out, it's always really interesting because everybody's so different.
Yeah, that is the truth. And then you got the parents, that ride around with all the snacks and all the treats, and they may not necessarily be talking, but they're like ready to just throw stuff at you, and if you're playing well, it's coming in gently, and if you're not, it's like coming at your face, yeah. I've seen it all. I will leave you with this. One of my parents one time was asked by my coach in high school how they were doing, and then it was quickly followed up with, "Do you want me to have them leave?" And I'm like what? It's like, I'm gonna stay focused on the golf. You do you, So yeah, the parents are definitely interesting. I think that'd be a tremendous topic, and I hope you write that book. You did start to say though, you've been asked to do it. Who's asked?
Oh, I'd rather not say.
She can't tell you because
I know.
Might be pending down the road. She might one of these days go, "Hey, how about that book?" She can't call them out.
I know.
Good try though. Good try though. But it wasn't because it wasn't because I wasn't passionate about the person and the topic. It was
Just wasn't time.
because it wasn't a good time for me personally to invest, because it takes a lot of time to write a book. and it had to be, you know, it had to be I had to have that chunk of time to be able to offer that, and it just wasn't the right time.
Yeah, I like it.
So before we depart, this is something that like I've really wanted to
Got
do,
one
really
more?
wanted to ask. Yeah. And I think
All right.
Pat knows where I'm going with this one. And so I'm going to do it because we've got like 3 minutes. What is your first thought when you hear the following words or phrases? And I'm gonna write this down. So I'm listening, but I
Okay.
really want to know because I love this kind of stuff. I eat it up. So
Oh,
what do you
dear.
think? What do you think of when you hear? That's something bad. What do you think of when you hear par?
Good. I mean, that's what I think of. That's
Grow
what
the
I
game.
want. Standard.
Oh, I'm sorry. Keep going.
Oh.
Keep going. I want to hear it.
Oh no, I was gonna say if I hear par, my first thought is good, because that's what the standard I'm trying to reach on every hole.
Cool. Grow the game.
Overused.
Amen. Penalty area.
Stress. First thing that comes to my mind is stress.
Ladies' tees.
Oh, tricky.
I can live with that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
Championship course.
Debatable. Yeah,
Okay.
I think
Always.
yeah. I mean,
Always.
That's a good one. I didn't even expect that one from you. Okay, so this one's gonna be a little off the wall, but
maybe
what do you
that's
think
because I cover women's golf, and sometimes I'm at a major championship venue, and I'm like, this is not a major venue.
Fair enough. And when I thought about this one, I was actually driving down East Bay, and I happened to go by East Bay Golf Course, and I've never played it, but I happen to know it's like barely over 6,000 yards. I shouldn't say barely, but it's not like a 7,500 yard course that's beautifully manicured. It is a very affordable, fun golf course, from what I'm told, but it is not like screaming championship golf.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, they've thrown it up there, so should I drive down there and find out for myself, like pay the $42 and go find out? But anyway, I digress. So, what do you think of when you hear Patty?
I think Patty Sheehan.
Yes. Yes.
I loved her
Yes.
as a
That
kid.
was my answer when he asked me the question.
The
Yes.
+4s. Oh,
Right?
she was the bomb diggity.
So much style. She's so fun to talk to too. I mean, I'm a big Patty Sheehan fan.
Yes. Yes, I got one right. What do you think of when you hear handicap?
When I think handicap, my first thought is I haven't posted a score in a really long time. That's the first thing that I think of. And
I
then
haven't posted a score in a really long time. I like that.
so the higher would be because that's my handicap is higher than whatever it currently says.
All right, fair enough. That's okay. I love the honesty. So, everybody's favorite format, not really. The scramble. What do you think if we hear scramble?
Oh, not used enough. I
Okay.
really wish that we would see scramble in in the team events for the LPGA, like the Dow. Actually, I'm not sure that I don't think they're doing it for the Grant Thornton. But the reason I say that is because I think it's so much more fun to see two players at the same position discuss their strategy and both hit a shot with, like for example, the Jutanagarn sisters, right? They've won the Dow and the LPGA, the team event. Moria is a short, straight hitter. Area is one of the longest players in the game. two totally different games, totally different mentalities and ways that they go about things. And I just think it would be so fun to see the two of them side by side hitting the same shots and from the same, hitting different shots from the same position, and watch how they attack and how they strategize. And they'd be standing next to each other as they do it, so the talking would be so much more fun. I just think that, and I think it'd be even better in a men's and women's format.
Very cool.
And that came from my husband. My husband didn't start playing golf until we got married, really, or we started dating, I should say. And so it's really interesting to hear his viewpoints because, he's new to I put that in quotes, to the game. It didn't really start playing the game a lot until his 30s. Wait, no, he was in his 20s when we met. Until his late 20s. And so when I think about, how he views the game and and it's more of like, a totally different outside the box thinker, where I'm more of a golf traditionalist, right? And my traditionalist self would have never really thought about having a scramble in a format because, scramble is what I like to play, but not what you see the pros play. But then when he explained it for why he'd like to see it, I was like, of course that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's a great
that
answer.
would be fun for the masses.
That's a tremendous answer.
Go
Now I
Ben.
feel really good for squeezing this in at the end because I was itching. So 2 more, if you can spare the time. What do you think of when you hear ping?
Oh, I am a forever. I think hoofer is what the first thing that I think of, because I've carried a ping hoofer forever. But yeah, the ping bag was what everybody had when I was a kid, and I played ping clubs too when I was a kid too. So that's my first thought, and my second thought is the Solheims, because the family of the Solheims are some of the greatest investors in the women's game, with obviously the Solheim Cup, and then they've always had a huge stable of female players. So great allies to women's golf.
Very cool. I'm a huge fan of ping, and it happened more later in life.
Fact that since I was about 12, I have only carried a ping bag unless someone made me carry a different type bag. It was a ping hoofer bag. You're 100% correct. Like that's the only, and I was using ping bags before they were called hoofers, but they were still carry bags. Ping
bags.
But that's the first time that came to mind.
I was gonna say, ever since I got a ping, I've never really gone back unless somebody else gave me the bag. That's kind of been like my one thing. If somebody else gave it to me, that's fine.
We had Jones bags in college one year, and I think that was the year that my clubs were out of a ping bag one year.
Right? Same. We had Sun Mountain, so we had a great ping bag my freshman year. And no offense to Sun Mountain, but we changed to Sun Mountain at some point, like in the middle of my college career. And so when I went back to the men's coach at Florida Southern and said, can I get one of your bags? Because I knew the men's bags were going to be better than the women's bags, which is terrible. But it was true.
That's awesome.
Well, anyways, long live the ping carry bag.
Did he give you one?
Oh, yeah.
When?
Way to go, Dougie. Way to go, Dougie.
Yes.
So the last one, because I feel like this one just can go in so many directions. 19th hole.
Oh, the 19th hole. I know what most people would think of first, but I think of conversation. Like the first thing that comes to mind is just, that's where all the memories are made, right? All the good banter, rehashing the day. Yeah, that's my first thought. Of course, there could be a drink involved, but the lasting memory is not the drink; it's the conversation.
Well, Beth Ann, thank you very much. I wish our time wasn't coming to a close, but we know time is precious, especially for the life of a journalist. And there's some more questions I would absolutely love to ask right now. So I hope that we can bring you back on again, maybe a time when EJ is able to join us. He had something come up that was unavoidable. But thank you so much for your time. That was truly awesome. And
really do appreciate it. That was great.
Yeah,
Thank you. I had a lot of fun. It was a good time. I'll have the next superstar for you on our next conversation.
absolutely.
Sounds great. I look forward to it.
Well, thank you guys.
All right.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Have a good day.
Ready.
Bye.
Adios.